Good evening, and welcome to Hill Conversations again. And today we continue our discussion on the budget and how the budget can be used as a tool in fighting or addressing the issues of inequality in Zambia. These are discussions that we would like to we hope that will be instrumental in helping the younger people and whoever is watching us in understanding why the budget is important, especially in a situation we found ourselves in as a country. So we would like the people to understand that the budget is a tool that can be used to address the issues that we are faced with in Zambia. And this evening, I'm hosting and speaking to Mwila. Mwila Makamba, like a big man.
Tatwafiro hapo yama.
Yes, Mwila Zemuila is a youth from Chingola, and so he'll be sharing with us his budget. And after 20 minutes of his presentation, we'll start asking him questions. So Mwila, for the purpose of this program, you'll be called Honorable Minister. So you are the finance minister for Zambia, and your budget is meant to address the problems that we have as a country. So when we call you honorable, we mean you honorable for this program. So you may go ahead with your presentation, Honorable Mwila.
All right. First and foremost, I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker Pilato, for giving me this opportunity to present my budget before this August House. I think one of the first things I would love to state is that being given such an opportunity to speak on this amazing platform, gives us an opportunity to stimulate certain ideas, through which we can create the Zambia that we all want to see in one way or the other. And when we talk about the whole concept of politics, one thing that we come to understand is that politics is basically but, an allocation of resources in society, and as we allocate these resources, we're trying by all means to see how best we can bridge the digital divide, how best we can deal with matters of poverty, to see how best we can address certain social and economical issues that are confronting our country. And as I present my presentation before this August House, one of the things I would love to state is that I'll try by all means not to sound so technical, or rather not to sound so economical, because I come to understand that in this particular August House, we are having, people that are coming from different backgrounds. So I think it's very important that the manner in which I will articulate myself is in a way where everyone that is listening to me right now will be able to understand. So even as I get into my discussion, I think without a single doubt, all of us know that our economy has been resting on sinking sand for some time now, and this level at which our economy has found itself to be. I think all of us will attest to the fact that even before the global impact of COVID-19, our economy was not doing so well. So as I present, my budgetary proposals before this August House, I'll try by all means to give, the economic landscape that we had in the year 2019 coming up to the year 2020, even as we begin to project for the year 2021. One of the things I would love to state before I go any further is that it becomes a challenge, for every nation, to address issues such as poverty, unemployment, lack of access to education, adequate health care, and any other social developmental issues if a nation's economy is not properly managed. And one thing that we all have to state is that in such an even allocation of resources, brings about a high level of inequality in our society, which is our fundamental discussion this very evening. And one of the fundamental points I would love to state is that, as we get into the year 2021, all of us know that we are getting into a politically charged environment. So as I present what I'm about to present right now, I'm trying by all means not to sound political. I'm trying by all means not to sound in a manner that, will make the government look as though we're trying to gain votes. Because one of the things that we have to state is that as we allocate resources for the year 2021, we ought not only to think of the election that is yet to come, but we have to think of the next generation, which I believe is fundamentally important in the development of our country. So as I get started, I would love to first and foremost give an economic review of the year 2019 coming up until the year 2020. Now, in the early months of 2020, all of us, we had an expected calamity that, that hit the whole entire global universe called COVID-19, which affected the whole entire global region economically, socially, and in many other sectors. However, I would love to take you back and just give a recap of the 2020 budget, that was established beforehand. And one of the things that were established, some of the objectives that were established in the 2020 budget were that by the year 2020, government established that, they wish to have an annual GDP growth rate of at least 3%. But I'm sure, for many economic experts that are listening to me right now, you and I know that we are currently standing at no less than 2%. We have not even exceeded the 3% that we had established before. The other objective that the 2020 budget set out to achieve is that it wanted to maintain an inflation rate within the target of about 6% to 8%, if I'm not mistaken. But currently, as we all know, our inflation rate is about 9.8%. And that is something that we also have to tackle, because when our inflation rate consistently increases, you and I, we come to understand that, standards of living become highly expensive, especially for that ordinary Zambian that is staying in the deepest parts of Dudumwezi. The other aspect is that the other objective of the 2020 budget that was established before Parliament some time back stated that, government wishes to reduce its fiscal deficit to about 5.5% of its GDP from 6.5%, and that was there between 2019. Currently, we are sitting about 8.2%. We are not doing well, and that's a field in which we also have to take into consideration. And the other, economic issue that I want to talk about as well is the extent to which our currency is consistently fluctuating. And I know that, as government, we have established, so many views where we have said that, the matters of climate change, matters of the trade war that has been happening between the United States and China have had an effect to the extent to which our economy has been performing badly. However, we have to understand that if we lack fiscal discipline, it's inevitable that our economy will not, perform to the extent to which it has to perform. And one doesn't need rocket science or a knowledge of economics for us to understand that when we talk about the extent to which domestic borrowing has skyrocketed in this country is beyond human imagination. So many people would ask, that are listening to me right now in this August house to say, what has led, to the kwacha depreciating? And some of the views I would love to give from my own personal analysis is that number one is Zambia's sovereign debt, which is almost 90% to its GDP. The highest percentage of debt. This is an extraordinary level, and it's very inconsistent with economic standards. Due to the fact that at international level, a country, a country is not supposed to, its debt does not need to exceed 60%, of its GDP. But when we look at where we are resting right now, it's unthinkable as a country. And then point number two as to why I feel our kwacha is fluctuating is Zambia's zero bond payment in terms of yields, which has been due in the last few weeks. However, today I was reading the Daily Mail newspaper, and I think they've paid the particular portion which they paid that, I think, this week. And to the audience that are listening to me right now, maybe let me give you a quick recap on Zambia's euro bond repayments. So government has issued 3 bonds. There's one for $750 million, which is due in 2022. There's another one for about $1 million, which I think is maturing at about 2024. And the other one is about 1.2 billion, which is payable between 2026 and 2027. Now, when we look at, such occurrences, such economic landscapes, one thing that we all have to understand that this is a burden that young people will have to inherit. And if we do not allocate resources in such a manner that we are able to mitigate some of these economical issues that we are having right now, then we'll find ourselves, having a future generation that has nothing to inherit but debt itself. And that is something that I wish to table before this August House. The other aspect that I feel that has led to the kwacha depreciating is also the aspect of, mineral exports. I'm sure all of us have seen the extent to which, we've been having issues in the mines. We've been having copper prices decreasing to a particular level. That has also contributed to the extent to which our kwacha might be decreasing, or rather, depreciating. And then the other aspect as well that I'd love to establish is international perception around investment in Zambia's capital market. Investors in Zambia's treasury bills, as well as bonds, so to speak, they have been liquidating their assets and taking these, resources out of the country, which results to capital flight and further putting pressure on the exchange rate in one way or the other. That is why we are finding our kwacha to dollar exchange rate sitting at about 20. And, to top up all this can be the issue of corruption as well. So if we don't deal with these issues, then we'll find ourselves not even achieving the fundamental results of the 2021 budget. So as I get now into the 2021 budgets, in the first place, I said that when people think 2021, the first thing that's coming to their mind is elections. So nobody's thinking economy, nobody's thinking about the budget, nobody's thinking about digital transformation. Everyone who's thinking about 2021, we are thinking about elections. But one thing that we have to understand is that elections come and go, but the economy, if we do not put into consideration certain objectives, we are going to find ourselves having serious inequalities in our country, which have actually been exposed as a result of COVID-19. Therefore, it is my plea that as I present what I'm about to present right now before this August House, my proposals are taken into consideration. Reviving an economy takes time, ladies and gentlemen. And government needs to show that they have what it takes to establish a framework that stands the test of time. And that is something I wish to present before this August House today. So some of the proposals that I have, as regards what ought to consideration in 2021 budget, point number 1 is we need to allocate a larger portion of our resources to education and skills development. So I am proposing that government increases funding towards the education sector with the aim of improving the procurement of access to ICTs in all government learning institutions in both rural and urban areas. I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, Pilato, you will understand that, during COVID-19, all of us have become digital, all of us have become virtually connected. However, there's a certain number of people in the rural areas that don't even have access to the internet. So what do we do about that? And we've been talking about bridging the digital divide before the year 2030, but I think 2030 is even far-fetched. We need to start thinking of bridging the digital divide as we speak right now. When you read my current book, Decolonization, one of the things I talk about is that it is important for us to start thinking of universal internet access. And it begins by allocating allocating a larger portion of our funding to education and skills development with a bias towards ICT. The other aspect I want to talk about as well is agriculture. One of the things I am proposing for the 2021 budget is that we prioritize upfront funding, to the Farmer Input Support Program, famously called as FISIP, and focusing more on the electronic FISIP, which was recently established, but we see how we can improve it as opposed to direct input supply. I'm sure all of us have noticed during COVID-19 that it's high time we started depending on our own domestically produced products. We need to move away from this world where we consistently depend on exports and exports, on imports and imports and imports. But we have to see how best we can sustain our economy within the boundaries of its own self. President Chakwera of Malawi just recently visited our country, and some of the things that he mentioned when he was speaking to His Excellency the President Edgar Lungu is that we need to stop depending on external support. We need to reach a point where we're able to fend for ourselves, where we're able to feed our families, where we're able to support our economy, where we're able to finance our own economy. And I feel the extent to which we allocate resources in our 2021 budget that can better the agricultural sector will be the first step to having a Zambia that feeds its own people. The other issue that I want to propose in the 2021 budget is the debt situation. Regardless of what I may propose right now, if the debt situation is not dealt with, then everything that we will be talking about right now will just be theoretical garbage. So I am proposing that the public external debt should be restructured, especially, the high interest Euro bonds and external commercial bank loans. I am proposing that these areas be restructured. And the other aspect is that government should encourage speedily reform in the procurement processes and introduce benchmark kind of pricing, in order for us to deal with this debt situation in which we are going in right now. And we also have to start thinking on how we can start dealing with corruption, because it becomes very difficult for the international community to waiver our debt if there's a corrupt tendency in some of our government players. Just recently it was reported in the newspaper that government has applied for a debt waiver on some of their debt that they're having. And, as Minister of Finance, I am proposing that we have fiscal discipline and we try by all means to deal with this debt issue before it becomes detrimental to the progress of our economy. The other issue that I'm proposing is the importance of industrialization. We've been talking about industrialization for I don't know how long as a country. And one of the things I'm proposing before this August House is that industrialization, in one way or the other, it remains a very critical point to Zambia's socio-economic development. And we need to review its performance in every industrial yard, so to speak. There are certain things that we have, Mr. Speaker, that, as a country, if you think about it, I always propose for provincial sector development. Each province in this country is blessed in a particular manner. What we need to start thinking of is how do we bring about development in an area such as Northern Province, taking into consideration what it has been blessed with, so that we don't have people in Northern Province thinking that the only way they can find heaven is when they move to Lusaka. How can we take into consideration the blessings that the Western Province has? How can we take into consideration the blessing, that Northwestern Province has, the blessing that all these other provinces have? There are certain provinces, such as the Copper Belt, that is blessed with talent and creativity as well. How do we begin to harness some of that talent to the betterment of our revenue and to the betterment of our GDP as well? I always propose that it's high time we started rethinking Copper Belt's economic landscape and start to move away from these elements where we think owning the mines can bring heaven to the Copper Belt and many other provinces on the issue of industrialization. The last 2 points I want to talk about is regional integration and the energy sector. On regional integration, one of the things I'm proposing is that in the 2021 budget, let us see how we put policies in place to support the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. As you know, Mr. Speaker, there has been an agreement that has been established by the African Union to cancel all trade barriers that hinder Africans to have intra-trade amongst themselves. And I believe the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is the hope that Africa has been looking for. Europe has, over 30% intra-trade amongst themselves. America has intra-trade. Asia has intra-trade. Africa, we have nothing. We don't even trade amongst ourselves. So the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is the hope that we've been waiting for. But the only way that the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement can be made possible, and how we should also bring it into fruition in the 2021 budget is when we begin to industrialize, when we begin to produce, when we begin to manufacture, when we begin to have our own made in Zambia products, not only relying on Trade Kings and a few other Indian established companies who are doing a tremendous job in putting our name on the mark. The other point I want to talk about is the energy sector. I am praying to God that as I am presenting this presentation right now, I don't get a power cut, because I'm looking good with the lights right now. So I'm praying to God that Zesco doesn't do what it does best. So the other issue that no, I am back in line, Mr. Speaker. I am back in line, Mr. Speaker. So the energy sector, in order for us to, I am sure, Mr. Speaker, you know that we have a target that we need to meet the rural electrification target of 51% by the year 2030. Now, that is something that we are struggling, to reach as a country in one way or the other. Therefore, I am proposing, that in our 2021 budget, we begin to focus on off-grid solutions to minimize costs of rural electrification. Because even as we talk about the issue of bridging the digital divide and having universal internet access and introducing ICT in schools and bettering the agricultural sector and industrialization and all these other beautiful things I've talked about, if the energy sector is struggling, if the energy sector is resting on sinking sand, then we will not be able to achieve everything that we have to achieve. So in order for us to bridge all these inequalities, I am proposing before this August House that we allocate resources to this sector with haste, and we allocate resources to this sector without even thinking twice in one way or the other, Mr. Speaker. In conclusion, one of the last thing I would want to talk about is the need for us to rethink our health sector. I think COVID-19 has shown that there are so many loopholes that exist in our health sector. So in our 2021 budget, I am proposing that we begin to rethink the manner in which we have established our health sector in order for our people in the rural setup to have adequate access to good health care. So it's important for us that in our 2021 budget, we start thinking of universal health care coverage. I think it's mandatory. It's not right for a 17-year-old young person in the deepest parts of Luwingu to go to a hospital to say that I've got a headache and just to be told that we do not have Panadol. I think it's high time that we started allocating resources to the betterment of our health sector in order for us to have a healthy and stable community. I think with these remarks, Mr. Speaker, I submit my submissions. I make my proposals known, and I ask for this August House to pass this particular motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Honorable. And at this point, I'll start taking questions from the honorable members of this House who are already asking very interesting questions. But before I go to the questions from members who are watching us from wherever they are watching, I would like to ask the Minister of Finance. I think he didn't talk about the tax, the issue of taxing. So we have a situation in this country where the poor people are taxed for social services that they are that they don't receive. Here is a poor teacher who gets 5,000 kwacha and goes home with 3,000 kwacha or 2,000 kwacha. What this teacher's tax is supposed to achieve is to make sure that there is a public clinic, there is public police, there is a public school, there is a public garbage collection.
That's right.
But so many of these social services that must be delivered by the state as it receives its his or her tax. This teacher's taxes. This teacher is made to contribute that tax, but still has to pay from the remaining money, from the remaining amount of money. Still has to buy it's just to pay somebody to come and collect the garbage from their yard. They still have to get their child into a private school. They still have to. They literally have to survive on private services. But even when they've been heavily taxed to service or to finance government duty, what is your proposal in terms of taxation? What is your proposal in terms of taxing the public?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that mind-engaging question. This is something that we all have to understand. A country only begins to tax its people heavily when it has no other source through which they can generate that particular revenue. When I take you way back to the colonial times and even during slavery times, we come to understand that our colonial fathers could tax our forefathers heavily. Why? Because they understood that it's through their labor that they were able to generate revenue. They had nothing to produce. The only way that I believe my government will be able, to have, to bring about tax reform, so that we have a society where people do not get feel as though they are choked by the tax systems that we have in this country, is when we begin to industrialize, when we begin to allocate revenue in the right places. Some of our, investors that come in this country do not provide the adequate tax that they have to provide to this particular country. We don't allocate much tax to the copper industry, and that is a sector through which we have to start rethinking in one way or the other. So I feel when we talk about, revenue, domestic revenue, location in one way or the other, we have to also take into consideration the issue of industrialization, the issue of resource mobilization, the issue of making our economy become more friendly to SMEs. If a young person wishes to start up a business, how can we ensure that they have a tax holiday over the next 3 years? So it's basically a policy kind of problem that we have in this country. So my proposal right now, my apologies, Mr. Speaker, that I forgot to mention that. My proposal right now is that as we begin to think of tax reform, let us start thinking of industrialization reform. Because when we have many sources through which we can generate revenue in this country, it becomes easier for us not to tax so much of our individual citizens that earn so little. I think that would be my submission on that point.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable. Honorable Malindi Piri is asking, healthcare is expensive. I think we need to realize that government cannot foot the bill and provide quality care. What do you think about privatizing the national health insurance?
That's a very, very good question. And I think if you look at, the Western worlds, most of the health system is probably highly privatized in one way or the other. But to answer that question, I'll answer that question with the capitalistic mindset as well as with the socialist mindset. On the capitalistic point of view, it is doable. It can be done. On a socialist point of view, however, I come to understand that our discussion that we're speaking about right now is the issue of inequality. And automatically, we come to understand that there are certain areas in this country. I've gone to the places like the northern provinces, a place called Kwachkaripa. In that place, up until this very moment, they still think that Kenneth Kaunda is still president. Now, already in that area, they only have probably one hospital, one clinician, and that's it. Now, let us assume that we privatize literally every single entity of our health sector. It becomes, we instead of us bridging this inequality as regards the health system, we find ourselves in a situation where we widen the inequality as regards health access. So I feel, what should be done right now is just adequate resource allocation to our health sector. I'll tell you the truth, Mr. Sorry if it's Mr. or Miss Malindi Piri. We need to be honest right now that my government in some of the areas, we have not been truthful in how we have been allocating resources as regards the health sector, to a point where we would acquire ambulances at a particular rate, which is not supposed to be the case. So I feel it's very possible for us as government to manage the health sector. What is expected of us is to have fiscal discipline in the manner in which we handle our resource allocation. Yes.
Honorable Washioga Junior Chipemba is asking, in terms of science, research, and technology, and what is your plan? The agricultural sector is one area that holds great potential in reviving our economy. However, we have not given it the attention that it deserves. For example, the issue of FISI, which I have seen running for almost 3 decades. 3 decades, it's has not yielded the expected results. Where do you think it's failing, and how do you think this can be addressed?
Thank you so much, Honorable Chipemba, for that profound question. Talking about science and technology, I think maybe you caught us when I was concluding my remarks. I talked about the need for us to start rethinking science and technology in this particular country. And one of the things that I actually stated in the beginning is that it is important for us, to start inculcating, to start inculcating some of these technological and digital studies in our kids that are in school in order for us to have a scientific and technologically driven society. For instance, when we talk about the issue of digital transformation, it does not first and foremost begin in the schools. It also begins in the places in which our leaders are working from. This is where we need to start thinking of, introducing science and technology in parliament, science and technology in some of, public sector run institutions, science and technology in some of the public sector run, educational facilities. So the issue of science and technology it's inevitable. And one of the things that I think we should revive in this country, and I am submitting this before the Minister of General Education, that we will allocate resources, and I think this is a proposal that I'm making, that we allocate resources to see how we can revamp JETS, which once existed in this country and it is non-functionable, because those young people in that specialize in JETS, they have the capacity to begin to rethink and reform certain scientific and technological imaginations that we might have in this particular country. And also, one of the things that we have to start thinking about as a country right now is how best maybe we can establish a science and technology leadership institute through which young people that have the potential, more like a Silicon Valley of Zambia. We can achieve that if truly that's what we want to achieve, more like a Silicon Valley of Zambia. And in the 21st century, Mr. Speaker, allow me to submit that in the 21st century, innovation and creativity is the key to governance. Countries that lack innovation and creativity cannot compete in the 21st century world, because the countries we admire, the Europe and the Americans and the Asians, they have thrived on the basis of innovation and innovation and creativity in the field of science and technology. Coming to the question on agriculture, Mr. Chipemba, definitely, as a country, we have been talking about the issue of we need to diversify the economy, we need to do this and we need to do that. This has been, our discussion since time immemorial. And some of the things that I proposed in my budget when I was giving my presentation is agriculture was second from education, that we need to start rethinking the manner in which we improve our agricultural sector. How do we begin to support the small scale farmers? How do we begin to support the commercially established farmers? How do we begin to establish certain agricultural policies that can help every farmer in this particular country? So talking about the issue of agriculture, it's also a policy and leadership issue. I'll make my proposals before this August House, but the Ministry of Agriculture has a serious role to play in rolling out policies, agendas, and developmental projects that can begin to rethink that particular department. I'll make my proposal. Making my proposal is one thing. It's like when you go to a lady, forgive me, Mr. Speaker, when you make your proposal, it's one thing. You have to wait upon the submission of the woman, whether she'll say yes or no. So I have made my proposal before the Minister of Agriculture, and it is my plea that they shall say yes to everything that I have established.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Honorable Masene Sebastian H. Mark Habanyama is asking, I heard him talk about allocating money to schools, but how is the finance department going to fight issues of delayed salaries for people like the teachers in order for the education system to be effective?
Like I've been saying throughout my submissions, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Habanyama, for that question. One of the things I've been establishing throughout my discussion is that the manner in which we allocate resources in this country, that's where the biggest problem is. So we cannot be having issues of salaries if we are allocating resources in the right direction. So matters of where we find teachers not getting paid, the health workers not getting paid, it is due to the fact that we are not allocating resources equitably. And this is due to the fact that we have this issue called, this, external dates that we're trying to deal with. And that is why in my earlier submission, I said, if we don't deal with our debt burden, if we don't deal with our external pressure, we are going to be finding ourselves we're going to be finding ourselves in so many challenges regards resource allocation. Let me give you a very let me bring it home. Let me bring it home. So let us assume that you owe someone a 1,000 kwacha, and then you make a 1,000 kwacha out of your hard work and your hard labor. It becomes very difficult for you to start thinking of how you're going to use that 1,000 kwacha to buy food, bread, and butter and put it on your table. Because why? There's someone that is consistently pressuring you. Offer abantu bapinda, you will not even be able to sleep. Make it worse. So same thing applies when we are owing people externally on a larger degree. It becomes difficult for us to allocate resources. So one of the things that I'm actually proposing before this August House is that as we begin to allocate money to the health sector, as we begin to allocate money to the educational sector, let us take into consideration the personnel that has to deliver the services that we want to be delivered in some of these sectors, because the education sector cannot exist without a teacher. The education sector cannot exist without a lecturer. The health system cannot exist without a doctor, a nurse, a physician. The list goes on. And if these people are not, if these people are not supported, if these people are not motivated, they're not empowered in the right way or the other, they will not be able to deliver to the best level of their expertise. So as I propose before this August House that we begin to rethink education and allocate resources to that particular sector, let us take into consideration that the people that are implementing what it is we want them to implement, they have to be motivated. And we have to allocate resources accordingly, and not because we're going to an election period.
Thank you, Honorable. Misozi Tembo says, I couldn't agree more. It is possible to set up a Silicon Valley of Zambia. Digital social innovation is the way to go. There is need for increased investment to the sector. Let me just speak another one. Then I don't know. We can comment.
Let me quickly comment on Honorable Tembo's statement. Thank you so very much for that submission. I think one of the things that I forgot to talk about while I've been making my submission is the importance of research and development. Africa, as we speak right now, in terms of research and development, our allocation to research and development stands at 0.2%. while we contribute approximately over 15% to the world population. But the extent to which we invest to R&D is only about 0.2%. Automatically, what is that telling you? Africans, we don't like thinking. Africans, we don't like researching. But it's possible for us to start heading into that particular direction. And to comment on what the earlier honorable stated, it's important that when we think of a Silicon Valley, when we think of a technologically, scientifically driven institute, that we are not only thinking far-fetched, but we're thinking in the realms of it can be done and it should be done. But in order for us to achieve that fundamental objective, we need to start thinking on how best we can allocate to research and development in some of our institutions.
Honorable Peter Nkumbwa is saying, brilliant submission from Honorable Mwila. My question, 2020 budget review. Honorable Mwila, do you feel that your expectations of 2020 budget has been met? And if not, how optimistic are you that your expectations in 2021 will be addressed?
Exactly. And that is why in the beginning I gave, and more like an economic review of the 2020 budget. The objectives that were set before then is that in the 2020 budget it was established that we have to achieve an annual GDP growth rate of at least 3%. Is it 3%? Yes, 3%. But currently we stand at no less than 2%. So that objective was not achieved. The other objective that was also set is that we need to achieve and maintain inflation within the target range of about 6 to 8%. Currently, our inflation rate is standing about 9.8%. Kwashara Fetubiri will be at 10.
Honorable, sorry, somebody had said it is about 13 point something percent.
Jesus Christ. Inflation is at 13%. Thank you so much for that submission. It's already in the double digit. Now, already we had said in the last budget, we said we want to be within a single digit of 6 to 8. We have not achieved that. So, and quite all right, I will hold true to the fact that COVID-19 to some degree has affected the extent to which we had allocated resources. However, one of the things that we have not done as a government as well is that we have not even established a recovery plan of post-COVID-19. So even as we think of 2021, have we first and foremost established an economic recovery plan of post-COVID-19, the Zambia we want to see after this global pandemic? What if we find ourselves in the second wave of COVID-19? Again, are we going to say in the year 2022 that the aspirations of the 2021 budget were not met due to the fact that we had an expected pandemic? I think that should not be the case. So I think even before we one of the submissions I think I would love to make before this August House is that as we present our budget this coming Friday, the next step that we now have to take is to start thinking of a recovery plan of post-COVID-19. Just 2 weeks ago, I was invited to speak at the launch of the Eswatini recovery plan for post-COVID-19, and they have established a very wonderful document on the Eswatini they want to see after this global pandemic. So to some degree, Mr. Peter, we have not achieved the 2020 budget, but it is my hope that with the proposal that we have established in the 2021 budget, we'll be able to find ourselves in the right place. And the last point I would want to make, Mr. Speaker, forgive me for speaking too much, it is my profession. The last point I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is that let us not have a reactive 2021 budget, but let us have a proactive 2021 budget. The biggest challenge that we have in this country is that we are so reactive and we are not proactive. So let us not react to the economic discrepancies that COVID-19 has brought about, but let us see how we can begin to think ahead beyond 2021, because whether we like it or not, we have 2026, and when we look at our national development plan, we are talking about 2030. So everything that we do should be driving us on how we can achieve our national development plan.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Honorable Lulumbi Mumba is asking, you mentioned that we need to promote local products and have more companies produce more, apart from trade. How do we do that when our markets are already flooded with a lot of foreign products? How do we promote our own produce, and what are we lacking in this area?
There are two things I'd love to state on that question. Thank you so much, Honorable Lulumbi, for that amazing question. There are two things I'd like to state. First and foremost, it is all dependent on policy implementation by government. The other thing, again, is that we, the local people, also have a serious role to play in making our local products have that particular brand identity to it, where they can compete at international level. The biggest challenge that we also have as local people is where we say, Karindi Muzambia and soka product narapanga, it's mandatory kafurika accept it. And we don't put in so much work as regards branding, as regards packaging, as regards marketing, as regards how we circulate this particular product. So in one way or the other, it's all dependent on policies. That is why in the beginning, I had established in my proposal that we start putting policies in place that support local products. And the only way we do that is where when these companies are coming on board. So we have ShopRite. We're living in a globalized world. So it's inevitable for us to have foreign companies in this country. So when we have a company like ShopRite, establishing its franchise in Zambia, one of the things that we have to establish is that 80% of its produce should be local products. And it's possible that can be done. And you put measures in place, and ShopRite puts measures in place and says, we're going to sell only locally manufactured products, but we want these products to be well branded. We want to ensure companies have to ensure that they put in a lot of work as regards packaging. So when government establishes policy, we as citizens and companies also have a role to play in ensuring that the products we bring to the market, they are also of value to compete on the international sector, because we should not only be thinking of selling our products in Zambia. Mind you, we have the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement that will soon be established. You and I should be thinking, how can my products be sold in South Africa, in ShopRite South Africa? How can my products be sold in ShopRite Malawi, in Pick and Pay Zimbabwe? That is what we should be thinking about. But the only way that can happen is when we attach value to the products that we are bringing to the table. So it can be done with the right policies and with the right mindset from our Zambian people as well.
Honorable Olivia Yamikangoma is saying, is it possible for the government to reduce their allocations to security and defense? They seem to have been allocating huge sums of money in the past budgets.
Thank you so much for that very politically charged question. I think one thing that I would love to state is that this is how resource allocation works in politics, right? So I'll take you all the way back to a simple country called Vietnam. So Vietnam, they noticed to say they are just neighbors to two powerhouse medical manufacturers, India and China. And they came to understand to say the only way that will be able to compete with some of these guys is when we begin to allocate resources to what it is that we want to see. So they started allocating resources to the aspect of agriculture and the manufacturing of and the production of rice, and also to the production of medical supplies. So right now, as we speak, Vietnam produces 90% of its medical supplies. They made a deliberate move to allocate resources to that particular sector. So same thing applies in this country. When we are allocating resources to a particular sector, then there's a particular objective. However, one of the things I want to submit before this August House is that as we as the Friday budget is being tabled before the House, one of the things I would love to submit and propose is that the extent to which we allocate finances to security and defense does not supersede the extent to which we allocate resources to education. Because what good is it if we have a security and defense that is well equipped, but we have a society that is illiterate? And that young person that is illiterate and is not enlightened, it's very easy for that young person to become a rebel. What are you doing now? Instead of empowering a 15-year-old child with the right sense of education, giving them the right resources, we're taking it in the wrong direction. The moment this child becomes a rebel, this child becomes a mismanaged cadre, you're going to use the very same defense and security forces to deal with that child. But the very moment you have an enlightened and educated and empowered community, the police will not even see a means through which they have to be, patrolling the streets each and every single day when the government is doing its job. I think that's what I would love to submit before Olivia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Honorable Godfrey Hungu Chanda is asking, I heard Mwila, I talk about the energy sector. You know where we are now is a world of climate change. What if tomorrow we wake up and find no water in our dams? So it's high time we put these things in consideration. I think there's need to switch to solar energy and wind and coal.
Thank you so much for that submission. I think in my earlier statement, one of the things I said when I was making my submission is that in order for us to meet the rural electrification target of 51% by the year 2030, government has to be encouraged in the 2021 budgets to focus on off-grid solutions that can minimize cost of rural electrification. When I talk about off-grid solutions, I'm basically talking about solutions beyond the issue of always depending on water in order for us to have energy supplies in our country. So I think Honorable Chanda has asked the question. He has already provided an answer, and those are some of the things when we talk about the issue of climate change. Yes, climate change will be there, and it is there. We have to face reality. Climate change is there, but are we going to sit and baby coat ourselves and warm ourselves and encourage ourselves and say there's climate change? It's more like you say, I will not put a roof, on top of my house, due to the fact that there's too much wind that is coming up, when you can basically find an alternative in order for you to safeguard yourself. So same thing applies. Climate change is there, but what do we then do after beyond climate change? This is where issues such as solar energy comes in, wind but most importantly, solar energy, due to the fact that naturally this country and Africa at large, we have so much supply as regards the sun. So we can start thinking in that particular direction. All that is dependent on resource allocation, because climate change is inevitable when climate change is there. And we also have a role to play in dealing with that narrative.
So whilst we're still on energy, don't you think unbundling ZESCO would contribute to their efficiency?
To some degree, ZESCO has reached, sorry to say this, it has reached idealistic menopause. They lack the reproduction of new ideas due to the fact that they consider themselves, a monopoly as regards the energy sector. So I feel when there's a certain level of competition in this country where people come on board and they bring new energy ideas to the scene, I think ZESCO will wake up and they'll start thinking of how best they can improve the energy sector. And this is normal. And normally that's what happens in every society, Mr. Speaker. In every society where a certain sector feels as though they have hegemony over others, they don't see the need of improvement, then neither do they see the need of consistent innovation and creativity. So I do agree with your affirmation, Mr. Speaker. There's need for us to start thinking on how best we can bring on board other industries or rather other companies or other sectors that can help us to revive our energy sector, because what we want at the end of the day is for our people to have consistent access to electricity.
Thank you, Honorable. So, Honorable Willie Zulu is asking, Honorable, how do you propose we restructure our external debt in a manner that does not leave Zambian citizens disadvantaged?
Thank you so much for that question. I think again. In one of my, earliest submissions, one of the things I talked about is a debt situation. And what I said is that I am proposing that the public sector debt should be restructured. That's the first thing. It should be restructured. Public sector debt should be restructured, especially the high interest Euro bonds and external commercial bank loans. But in order for us to restructure some of this external debt that we have, it also begins with our own in-house, politics. It becomes difficult for us to manage our debt when there's a high level of corruption. It becomes difficult for us to manage debt when there's fiscal indiscipline. It becomes difficult for us to manage debt when we do not allocate resources to revenue generating mechanisms. It becomes difficult for us to manage our debt if we're only allocating resources to consumption and not to anything that can help us to generate revenue. So in one way or the other, in order for us to deal with our external debt, there's need for us to also deal with our internal issues as a country right now, because we are disadvantaging citizens, and not only disadvantaging citizens, Honorable Zulu, we are disadvantaging Zambia's future generation, because 10 years from now, I'll probably be 40, and God willing, if I become president of this country, I'm going to inherit a particular debt that my forefathers left some time back. And who knows, when I become president of the country, I become pressured too much, I end up borrowing and I end up not, and it begins to be a cycle. It begins to be a cycle. And that's not what we want. We want progressive ideas through which, when we say we have borrowed $1 million, we know we're going to allocate that money not to buy one fire truck, but we're going to get that $1 million to establish an industry that is going to revamp money back into the economy, and in a short space of time be able to pay back that money. So the only way we can deal with external issues is when we begin to handle our internal problems as we speak right now.
Honorable, you have successfully articulated the issues, the problems that we have locally, our politics, our policies, and it's not a beautiful picture. It's a sad reality. What is your strategy for attracting direct foreign investment in Zambia?
I think one of the things I think I would love to state, one of the number one strategy is less interference in the private sector as government. Transparency and accountability on the part of government as well. The only way that we can attract investor confidence is when we show as government that we are transparent, when we show as government that we are accountable to our people, when we show as government that we allocate resources to things that we say we're going to allocate resources for, when we show as government that when the citizens ask, where did you take this money, we can easily say, this is how we use this money and this is how this money was allocated. So the only way that I can attract foreign direct investment is also by beginning to identify certain sectors in our country that need improvement and that need investment, that need resource allocation and funding, so to speak. So when I go to the Western province, how will I be able to say we can produce glass in this particular territory? How can I begin to bring certain investors to invest in that particular region, in the end process, provide employment? When I go to the Northwestern province, I'll be able to say, oh, I think these guys have got something like pineapples, if I'm not mistaken. How do we begin to industrialize that particular area? When I go all the way up to Northern province, I'm able to tell these guys are into aquaculture. These guys are into fish farming. How can we be able to bring foreign direct investment into those particular territories and produce industries through which we can have value addition to some of the products that are being produced in some of those territories? So I think that's some of the strategies I think I would love to propose before this August House in order for us to attract foreign direct investment in this country.
So, Honorable, I got your answer, but I think you were not in any way acknowledging the environment that is prevailing, where investors would want, first of all, before an investor invests in a country, they would want to firstly look at your policies. They would want to look at your corruption issues. They would want to see how independent is your judiciary. They want to see an environment where they are putting in their money. My question was speaking directly to those concerns. What's your strategy considering that your reality is hostile for people to bring in their investment in your country? What is it that you are planning to do that will convince this investor that they should come and invest money in your country, even when it means that it may be costly for them to start operating because of your corruption, even when they know that your government may nationalize their investment and they can go to a local court, a court within the country? What is your strategy? How do you plan to convince those investors to come and invest in your country when your reality is that bad?
I think one of the strategies I think I would want to propose before this August House is, number one, to deal with the issue of corruption. I think every country that has progressed, either now or then in the past or in the present, had to deal with the issue of corruption firsthand. And I think that's what China did. That's what Russia did. Every other country that we admire today had to deal with the issue of corruption. And when I talk about dealing with the issue of corruption, I am not talking about taking someone, the SEC investigating someone, and after a few days down the line, they are acquitted. I'm talking about seriously handling the issue of corruption, not with a defense mechanism, but handling the issue of corruption with a solution-focused mechanism, where we show investors that we do not tolerate corruption. And how we do not tolerate corruption is that every person that is found wanting, this is what happens to them. When we show that, and that is something I would love to propose before this August House and before her honor, the Vice President, as she listens to my submissions, that you take this particular submission before the President, that at the end of the day, the number one disciplinarian of this particular country is the one himself who is running the nation. So in order for us to show our investors that we do not tolerate corruption, it first and foremost has to begin from the head who is leading the territories of our land and who shows no tolerance as regards matters of corruption, just the same way that former President Mwanawasa did during that particular time. And the other issue that I also want to talk about is that, we need to create a conducive environment through which foreign direct investment can thrive. Because dealing with corruption is one thing, but yet creating a conducive environment is yet another thing. And when I talk about a conducive environment, I'm talking about the tax system. When I'm talking about a conducive environment, I'm talking about, the issue of, political cadreism and how certain people that are affiliated to a particular party, they feel as though they are more privileged than another soul, than another entity belonging to a particular party. So I think there are certain areas that we have to address, as you have already stipulated, Mr. Speaker. But first and foremost, one of the things I would love to state is that we need to show that we have no form of tolerance. We don't tolerate any kind of corruption in this country. I think that's what I would love to state.
Honorable Chris Mwila is asking, how do citizens get involved in the decision-making process of the country so that politicians don't do as they wish? And how do the citizens hold politicians accountable in their decisions?
I hold government accountable. Mr. Speaker, you try by all means to see how you can hold this August House accountable as well. And one of the things I would love to state is that no one came and slapped me on my face and told me to start holding government accountable. It is a decision that I had to make on my own behalf. And I think the submission I'd love to make to that statement is that the only way that citizens can actually get involved in the governance process of this particular country is to make the decision to start making the problems and the challenges that are going through that we are going through in this country, you start making them personal. Let me take you all. Many young people will say the environment is not conducive for young people to be in positions, to be in areas of governance. But let me take you all the way back to the 1960s, and I'll tell you that the environment was actually not even conducive a little bit for our forefathers when they started fighting for this country's independence. Simon Mwansakapwepo was about 26 years old when he put his life on the line for this country. Dr. Kaunda was about the same age. Mama Julia Chikamweneka was 25 years old. Mama Kankasa was 18 years old. I can go on and on and on. Vernon Mwanga was, I don't know how old he was about 16 to about 15 years old when he committed his life to the progress of this country. Andrew Sadanis was 21 years old. Simon Zukas was about 30 range, at about that range. So in one way or the other, these were young people that dedicated themselves to the prosperity of our country. So it's high time that each and every one of us, to you as well, Honorable Chris Mwila, that we started getting involved in the prosperity of our country, that we started speaking out when we see things are not going well, and we compliment when things are going well, and we try by all means to see how best we can be relevant to the status quo of our country. So when we talk about the issue of being accountable and being relevant to the issues that are confronting our country, it all begins by first and foremost making a deliberate decision. And lastly but not the least, Mr. Speaker, to every young person that is in this August House listening to us as we deliberate on these important matters, it is important that you are knowledgeable. We have been told that young people, we speak anyhow. You know, when you open up your mouth to speak as an honorable young person, you need to show enlightenment. You need to show that you know what you're talking about. You need to know that you read your policy documents. You need to know that you have read the presidential speech. You're going to listen to the briefing on Friday. So at the end of the day, the only way we can be accountable, just as Mr. Speaker is also accountable, just as he provides accountability to the government, just as I also do, you need to show yourself approved as a delegate young person who's relevant to the status quo of our country.
Thank you very much, Honorable. We've come to the end of the program. And as usual, I'm going to ask you to make two calls of action. In your concluding remarks, I would like you to speak to the leadership of this country and make propositions, and also to what is it that you'd like them to do, and also to the people that are watching you speak, the general public. I would also want you to give them what to do, ask them to do something. What is it that you're proposing that they do in your conclusion? Honorable.
I think in my concluding remarks, Mr. Speaker, the first thing I'd want to say before the leadership of this country is, let us have a humanity at heart kind of approach. You know, leadership is not about us. Leadership is about people. You know, and the moment we come to understand that service to humanity is the greatest currency there is, you know, and the moment politics become service-oriented and not self-oriented, then we're going to have a 5-year-old kid aspiring to be a politician. We're going to have a 5-year-old kid dreaming of becoming a politician. Our leaders have the power to change the narrative of politics. Young people are afraid of going into the field of politics because of the narrative that our political leaders have shown. So I think my advice right now to the political leaders out there is that you have a serious role to play in inspiring the next set of young leaders. You have a serious role to play in inspiring the next set of politicians. You have a serious role to play in inspiring the next set of members of parliament, the next set of permanent secretaries. But the moment you show that less of service approach in the field of politics, then that is that is the narrative that you're preaching for every young politician that is coming up, that you have to be a thug, that you have to be a hooligan, that you have to speak in a particular manner in order for you to be considered a leader, that you have to throw a stone, that you have to do something else in order for you to be regarded as a leader. But that is a narrative that we have to change as leaders that are occupying certain territories. And to the people that are listening to me as I speak right now, my remarks to you, you know, my submission before you right now is: be vigilant, be resilient, be energetic. Understand that there's a reason to why you're existing today. You are Zambian for a reason. You're a Zambian because you have to play a role to the betterment of this country. You are not born in South Africa, neither were you born in Botswana, but you are born in Zambia in order for you to contribute to the Zambia that we all want to see. Zambia is Zambia because of Zambians. And you and I have to play a role in addressing the problems that we are seeing in our community. When you see a problem of poverty, what are you doing about it? When you see an issue where there's lack of transparency, what are you doing about it? When you see an issue where a family cannot afford 3 meals a day, what are you doing about it? So let us all be relevant in being the solution that this country wants to see, and let us not only be armchair critics. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable, and thank you very much for everybody that tuned in and followed the conversation. The Honorable has obviously shared a lot of thoughts that I've held for a long time, and I think sounded like you were reading my notes through and through. Yeah, so like I couldn't even ask you so many questions because you were saying my stuff. But I would ask the viewers to join us tomorrow as I host another interesting mind, a young mind, and they'll be sharing what they feel the budget should be in addressing inequality in Zambia and in responding to challenges that we are faced with as a country. So join me tomorrow, same time, same place. And I must thank you, Honorable Mwila, for representing Copper Belt super well. Thank you very much for the time, and bye-bye.